4 and the Office of Grants and Strategic Advancement.
Thank you. Board Chair Mahaffey, Vice Chair Haggerty, Superintendent Moore, and esteemed board members. We are thrilled to present to you today from the Office of Grants and Strategic Initiatives. Our department has a singular goal, and that is to secure funds to support our district's mission and enhance our educational programs. In this presentation, we will provide you with comprehensive information on our department's roles and responsibilities, grant processes, available resources, annual reports, highlights and trends, and grant activities for the current fiscal school year. Although Ms. DeFore is unable to join us this afternoon, we are delighted to have Dr. Lewis, and who is the Grants Development Coordinator, and Ms. Muse, who will present the information on behalf of Ms. DeFore. Without further ado, I would like to turn over the floor to Dr. Lewis to begin her informative presentation.
Thanks for stepping in, Dr. Lewis. Thank
Thank you so much, Superintendent Moore, Chair Mahaffey, and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to share the work of the Office of Grants and Strategic Advancement. So the Office of Grants was established in 1985 with the overarching goal of securing grant funding to advance the mission, strategic goals, and initiatives of the Wake County Public School System. Over the past 38 years, that overarching goal has not changed. This presentation will provide an overview of the role and responsibilities of the Office of Grants, along with some highlights and trends of our work. As passionate supporters of public education, our team spends our days seeking out resources that will support WCPSS, students and educators, classrooms, and schools. We identify and share funding opportunities with staff both at central services and at schools. We assist in various ways with preparing grant applications. Once grants are awarded, we monitor implementation and are a resource for ensuring compliance with grant requirements. So as we come across grant opportunities that may benefit the district, we review the opportunities and check in with leadership in various departments as needed to explore whether or not the grant is a fit for our setting. When a potential grant looks promising, we place it on the board précis for approval, in keeping with policy code 8440. So once the opportunity is board approved, we let staff know they may move forward with submitting their grant application. When a grant deadline is too soon for us to receive board approval in advance of the submission deadline, we seek conditional approval from the superintendent and place the item on the board agenda for approval at the next board meeting. If the board were to decline approval, then the grant application would be withdrawn. So let's talk about some of our responsibilities. Our responsibilities include scanning the environment for all kinds of grant opportunities, whether it's federal, state, foundation, and corporate grants, ranging from classroom projects to district-wide initiatives. The district and its schools are committed to providing for the educational needs of students. Competitive grants can help supply for wants to enhance and enrich classrooms, pilot programs to try out new ideas, and supplement funding to enhance our core work. We seek to build the capacity of staff to write grants by offering grant trainings on request. We even host open office hours twice a month to answer questions and support grant writing, and we are available by phone or email to help. We assist our central service staff with developing and submitting grant applications that serve multiple schools or district-wide. Every grant is different. We serve as a resource on grant implementation and compliance for federal, state, and local rules, as well as the specific grants requirements, and work to ensure that grant reports are submitted in a timely way. The Office of Grants primarily focuses on collaborative and competitive grants. Collaborative grants are those that we partner with outside entities such as universities or nonprofit organizations or community-based organizations, and they serve as the lead applicant. Most entitlement grants, those are our formula grants, and they are managed by the State and Federal Programs Department.
I could just interrupt for a second. Entitlement grants would include things like Title I, Title II, Title III or IV. Those are the programs that are managed by the state or federal government. SPED, right, the funds that we get for there are from the state government as well. So,
Thank you, Superintendent.
sure.
So the Office of Grants is comprised of 4 staff members. We have our Senior Director, Cindy DeFore, a Senior Administrator, myself, a Compliance Specialist, which is Ms. Mills, and a Processing Technician, which is Alicia Young. We like to say we are small, but we are mighty.
I said Seabiscuit.
So our team has developed departmental goals that align our work. We are committed to supporting our district's aspirations and strategic plans through grants and resource development. We believe that strong relationships and proactive communication with our colleagues benefits us all, helping to build ownership and alignment around our shared work. We seek to address disparities and inequities and focus our grants where they will have the greatest impact. We strive to provide timely, efficient, and effective support to our teachers, staff, families, and community partners. Over the past 3 years, as our district navigated the pandemic, our team assisted with device distribution, staff vaccination events, and regularly supported schools dealing with staffing shortages. So the grants process provides a structure to help us follow district policy and ensure alignment with district guidelines and track grant effort and success. School principals have the option to name up to 3 staff members to serve as school grant contacts in their schools. Anytime anyone is interested in applying for a grant, they work with their principal or their school grant contact to submit what we call an intent to apply form. We respond quickly and provide them with next steps. We make sure the opportunity is first board approved and coordinate with other departments as needed, such as technology services, risk management, and facilities and planning, and more. Our hope is to provide support prior to a grant being submitted, as this can help things go smoother when an award is made. Grant funding does not exempt a project from the need to adhere to district policies and guidelines. For example, anytime there's software being requested, we have to make sure that it has to be in the digital resource product library and it has to be approved for use. There are a number of grant-related resources available online for our staff that we provide. Following board approval for a grant, we communicate new opportunities to staff by posting announcements and sharing articles, as you can see on the screen on Wake Connect. We maintain a list of board-approved grants with links and deadline information that staff can access as a resource. We also maintain a grants forecast calendar and list of potential grant opportunities by categories. Our Learning Central grants course also has resources for finding, writing, and managing grants. There are also resources for school secretaries and bookkeepers to assist them as they manage grant funds. Now I would like to share some information about our annual reports. So we prepare a summary of grant development activities each year. The timing of the report depends on award notifications and that comes from our funding agencies. The report includes data from central services and school-based grant activities. It is not a financial accounting of grants managed by WCPSS. We actually just report on annual grant activity, efforts, and successes. For our reports, we record the grant award in the year in which the grant was submitted. For example, in the spring of 2020, we submitted a magnet grant in May, fiscal year 2019-20, but the grant was not awarded until September, fiscal year 2021. The grant will not be reflected in our 2019 report. Now I would like to share some highlights and trends regarding grant activity in our district and a summary of our efforts and successes. As we move into this portion of the presentation, I would like to highlight that most school-based grants are submitted by our teachers. Grant writing is not in their job description, but they go above and beyond their responsibilities to seek out additional resources for their classrooms and in our schools. I am constantly amazed by the extra time and effort that they commit to enhancing the learning experiences of all of our students. This chart shows the number of competitive grant applications and submissions the submissions are in blue, and the resulting grant awards are in green from 2016 to 2017, all the way from 21 to 22 fiscal year. You can see from the chart that both the number of submissions and the number of awards decreased during the COVID-19 pandemic. This downward trend could be in part because a number of funders stopped their offering of grants during this time of COVID. And then, of course, staffing shortages and additional responsibilities that teachers carried on during the pandemic limited their availability to apply for grants. That said, you can also see the percentage of applications that were successful. They stayed high, ranging from 75% to all the way up to 83% during the COVID years. Some people say that grant writing is like baseball, that if you get a third of the grants you submit, you're doing well. So you can see that our district is really hitting it out of the park, for sure. All right, so this slide focuses on the competitive grant amounts requested and amounts awarded during 2016-27 fiscal year to 21 to 22. Remember that we record the grant in the year in which it was submitted, not when it was received. Even though the number of grants submitted went down, as shown on the previous slide, the amounts of the awards, the grant awards, actually did not decrease. But it is easy to see which years that included a magnet grant competition. Yes, and we have celebrated our success in receiving the magnet award over the last 3 grant cycles. So this slide illustrates what teachers and staff are asking for in their grant applications. This data is specific to 21-22. But this pie chart is consistent from year to year, with literacy and English and language arts being the largest single category. Our district serves as the fiscal agent for Wake Up and Read, and their grants are also included in this pie chart. We see a lot of grants requests come from teachers asking for books and other literacy materials. Now let's talk about Donors Choose. It is the only board-approved crowdsourced funding. Now there are a large number of crowdsourced funding sites out there, fundraising sites, but after a thorough review, our district made the determination that only Donors Choose had the level of accountability and transparency needed for our public education. Donors Choose is very responsive to our district needs and guidelines. For example, when our teachers apply for technology equipment, the Donors Choose site has a pop-up window that helps guide the teacher on our district's requirements. Again, this chart shows a decrease during the COVID years. So the Office of Grants annual report can be found on the grants page on the district's website as well as Wake Connect. It is in a little blue box at the bottom of the page marked reports. Each annual report shows the notable competitive grants awarded that year. And as you can see, this chart is from 21-22. So how are we doing this year? Are we still seeing some decreases due to COVID? Well, we're not certain because, we're in a midst of a magnet grant cycle, so that may be one benefit. But significant grant activity has been reported to date. There is one more quarter left, of course, in the year, so time will tell. But these figures were pulled from our database on March the 15th of this year. So in conclusion, our Office of Grants has a unique vantage point in our district. We see how staff live out their passion for education by going the extra mile to seek additional resources for their students, classrooms, schools, and the district. We interface with funders who care about students and provide support for our students and schools. From solar arrays and robotics to books, musical instruments, art supplies, and more, the support provided by our community makes a difference in the lives of our students each and every day. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight our work and our trends in the Office of Grants. I will take any questions that you may have.
Dr. Lewis and Ms. Hughes, I just want to say thank you for what you do. We know that there are gaps in our funding, and so the work that you do to research these opportunities, to make things happen, to see the success of our magnet grants is incredible. And you certainly are a small and mighty team. And anyone who's ever written a grant knows that it's no joke. And so the fact that you're there to support our teachers as they're going through that process is amazing and incredible. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Board members, Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you. I really appreciate your presentation today. Thank you. I had just a couple simple questions. I know that as board members, a lot of us are active in different areas of the community, and sometimes people come to us with different grant opportunities. We don't want to reinvent the wheel or tell you about stuff you already know, but if we get something that looks interesting, should we pass that on to you? Is there someone else we should refer it to?
Yes, that is something we would be more than happy to look into. You can certainly give that to Dr. Robinson or Cindy DeFore, our senior director, as well. We will vet it to make sure that it meets district requirements and guidelines, and we would be more than happy to pass that along. And to wonderful.
And so when you talk about like the districts and guidelines, I know sometimes grants have a lot of strings attached, right? A lot of reporting requirements, and sometimes, depending on who's responsible for administering it, it might be that the work monitoring and complying with the grant could cost you more than the actual grant. So what sort of criteria do you use to try to determine if it's a good deal or a bad deal for the district?
We always want to make sure, first of all, whoever's applying has the capacity to carry it out. That is important. One of the things that we don't want to do is ever have to return funding to a funder, right? We want to make sure that it's going to be used for a specific purpose, but we want to make sure that the capacity is there. And like I said, as long as we are making sure that it's meeting our guidelines and not something that cannot be done. And we just want to make sure that we protect our students as well. Even with like Donors Choose, we're very careful to making sure that our teachers do not post pictures of our students They can post pictures of their classrooms and things like that. But we're making sure that we protect our teachers, our staff, and our students as well. But we're going to make sure that they have the capacities to carry it out successfully as well.
I appreciate it. That sounds really great. My last question is a two-parter one, and it just, when the grant money comes in, this is the first part, like, I know there's a cost of administering the grants, like we've talked about, but does any money come out of the grant for central office or for administrative or for other schools, or is all of it used for the purposes in the grant?
That is a good question. It just all depends on what level of funding we're talking about. If
Yeah.
we're talking about some of the small foundation grants or our central services, it all depends on what's been placed in the budget. Or are there specific costs that you're asking about?
Well, so there's some legislation right now. I don't know if you've been following it in the General Assembly.
Yes.
House Bill 219.
Yes, I've heard, yes.
And there's a section of it, Section 7, that talks about diverting money that goes to public schools and taking a portion out for charter schools. And, right now, like with our tax money or local supplement, charters do get a, healthy share of those funds. But for grant funding, I know, like, I've worked in the nonprofit area, and if a funder makes a grant to a school for, say, a community garden, or for like an accessibility program, or something specific to that school, right now the legislation would require taking some of that money out of the school system or away from that school, and then divert it back to a charter fund. And so I was just kind of like wondering how the flow of money works.
I will say that
Superintendent Moore?
I'm just going to, it's a bigger picture
Yeah.
question too with the legislation. Couple of things to consider in the legislation that you're referencing and how the grants work. I think occasionally a grant structure will have an indirect cost or something like that associated with it that is
Yes.
part of the grant application and woven into the amounts, so we know what those are. But the vast majority is going to who other than what's required in the grant as part of the process. So up front, you know exactly how much a school, an individual, a program is going to get. The legislation that you're referring to has a couple of pieces to it that would interrupt that current flow, which is where the funds actually get deposited, and then how additional funds might need to come out of that. And that is going to be very hard to pin down because that's a variable amount every year, depending on the number of students that we are serving that are verified as being enrolled as Wake County residents in a charter school in Wake County. And so that would be sort of difficult to pin down. And quite frankly, I'm not sure how the funders of the grants would respond to that being an additional line item that is now included as a part of a grant process that may not fall in line with what the funders intend.
Well, and that answers my question, because like if you're writing a grant and proposing a budget, there's grants, for example, to teach a language in a school or to teach computer science or vocational education in a program. And I'm sure you would put together a budget for the cost of that. But if like a portion of that grant had to be taken to go to a school that might not be teaching or building or offering that, would it disqualify you from the grant, or do you have to kind of like pad it to get the amount that you need? It just seems like it'd be problematic.
Those are
good
questions that
Those are outstanding questions in both weightiness and waiting for the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Sam, go ahead.
Well-
No.
Yes,
Well, and to further add to the complexity, if a grant has a matching requirement, that's going to further muddy the scenario that you're describing.
Quick question.
Appreciate that.
To piggyback on Chris, and this can apply to federal dollars if we're saying, some of the bills that have come out have a lot of money, and maybe we don't qualify. Do we lobby our local congressional district to say, here's why we don't qualify, but we would like to?
So that really happens sort of at the leadership level. So
Okay.
so I do some of that, or my team might do some of that in different meetings that we are in to explain, a perfect example that I will give you is there's a bill that's gone through the legislature, I'm not sure what stage it's in right now, that would put into effect a law that every Tier 1 and Tier 2 county would be required to have a nurse in every school. It does not include Tier 3 counties. Wake County is a Tier 3 county. But our concern for those school systems that are left out of that legislation that we have expressed is that the baseline of a nurse in every school should apply to every school, not just Tier 1 or Tier 2 counties. And so the legislation should actually start there, and then if it needs to differentiate based on Tier 1 or Tier 2, that could possibly be a need, but what's the baseline? And if the baseline is 1 in every school, then the legislation should include all counties. And that's an example of how we might advocate for something.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you both so much for coming, and you were excellent pinch hitters, and thank you for all you do.
So much.
Up next is our 2023 Capital Improvement Plan Executive Summary Update. We'll have Mark Strickland with us, and Douglas Condon and Jack McAleer.
I understand.
While we're getting set up for the existing board members, you all have been through this before. For the new board members, we do this every year about the same time. This is an executive summary update, our CIP, our rolling 7-year CIP. This is a great tool that we use to plan the projects that we have in front of us. This is unique to Wake County Public Schools. I've never experienced it. It's rolling 7-year CIP. So it is a great tool for us, a great planning tool that we use, and I'm thankful that we have this group together. We have been through this draft with our CIP and our core teams. We've gone through it and vetted it and looked at it and talked about it, so we're bringing it to you all today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jack and add some comment as we go along.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having us here today. Mark said we're here to discuss the 2023 annual update, CIP. Presentation purpose and goals. We're going to go over overview of the CIP components, what makes up the CIP, give you a high-level overview of that, discuss the changes from last year's plan, and then discuss the next steps for approval process. So the CIP components is broken down into 3 major sections. We've got new schools, existing schools, and other program requirements. For new school projects, this is defined by the construction of new schools not previously in existence on a new or existing site. So a couple examples, Herbert Akins Road Middle School, Apex Friendship Elementary, and Woods Creek Elementary, to give you an idea of what that category looks like. Existing school projects, a little more complex. The majority of these projects are full replacements of an existing school buildings on an existing site. So replacement would be new construction on an existing site. York Elementary and Fuller Elementary would be examples of that. A renovation, which is an existing school on an existing site. We do renovate the existing building and perhaps an addition or two. For instance, Wiley Elementary is a good example of that. And then for relocation, these are a little more rare, but it's an existing school to be relocated on a new site with new construction. So Fuquay Verena Middle School and Wendell Elementary School are 2 examples of that, which are currently on the 7-year plan, have not completed yet. So the other program requirements section, this includes several different budget line items. Permit fees, this was really just a holding line item for the county to track these budgets better than they were previously hidden in the projects. Life cycle, this includes individual systems and equipment replacements, HVAC, electrical controls, roofing, those types of systems. Educational equipment. This includes high school auditorium, projectors, performing arts equipment, instructional equipment, and those types of categories. Technology, devices, and infrastructure. That is student and staff devices replacement and also network expansion upgrades. So it's kind of the hardware and the software for technology, devices, and infrastructure. Security, kept this pretty vague for obvious reasons. Includes security upgrades to our schools. Temporary classrooms. This is the mobile/portable classroom. Land line item. This includes new land acquisition for new schools or other program facilities. Space needs analysis and prioritization. That's our SNAP category. And print is partial renovation and improvements right below that. The last couple items are related to program management for assessments and program contingency, which is funded at 3% of all the other costs of the CIP. All right, moving to our 2023 executive summary update. As Mark said previously, this has been reviewed and recommended by the CIP team and the joint core team. The proposed funding aligns with the county debt model. So to look at the new school summary, the changes from last year's plan are highlighted. First one we come to is H15, the Capitol Boulevard site. Funding for that school has been shifted down to Cary High School and the existing schools due to there's just not a need as initially thought at H15 to develop a program there. And then for the out years, the two new elementary schools TBD, you have design funds falling in FY29 and FY30. The existing school summary, a couple of changes from last year here. Wendell Elementary School, this is not a material change, but timing-wise, last year we did not name Wendell. It was previously held up in the new school category, but it is going to be a replacement. So we moved it down to existing schools this year. Cary High School, as previously mentioned, this is taking the place of the Capitol Boulevard funding. Funding is not changed due to capacity with the debt model and the county's ability to fund it. And then the last four changes are adding elementary schools, exist 4 renovation projects that are scope and school type are to be determined. All right, so the last section is our program requirements summary. No changes from last year except the program contingency category in FY26 and FY27. We restored $4 million to each of those years. That was not in alignment with the debt model last year. We were able to bring that back this year. So those are the only changes to this section. This is just an overview of the totals for all 3 categories. 7-year plan goes from FY24 to FY30 and totals $2.7 billion. So the next steps. Today we're presenting to the work session. This is going to be a part of the final process review at the Facilities Committee meeting this month. If that goes well, we'll incorporate the feedback, and the final CIP presentation will go to the BOE work session on April 25th to be approved by a resolution at that same regular meeting on April 25th. Questions, comments, and feedback?
If I could, I just want to expound on a couple of the slides, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If you could go back to slide 9 for just a second. So, just for the sake of clarity, H15, which is the Capitol Boulevard site, the old Bobby Murray Chevrolet location, we've anticipated it being a high school at some point, but we've not determined either the programming or necessarily that it's a priority need as a high school in that area versus other needs that we have in the district. So the funds that were in yellow for Cary High School, for that H15, have been moved to the next slide, which show that we're moving up Cary High School, which was our next choice, I think, outside of the 7-year plan that didn't quite make it into the 7-year plan, that we are now moving back into the 7-year plan to at least begin the funding model and appropriate the funds for the renovations that are needed there. And I think it's important to to note that that is the purpose of a 7-year plan. It is to understand that as needs change across those 7 years, we find that something else might be a priority, that we are able to shift some funding, especially in the further out years, where we have less flexibility in the near term, but we have greater flexibility in the outer years. So that's what you see happening in terms of the changes between slide 9 and 10. Additionally, on slide 10, when he mentioned that there are 4 additional existing TBD, and is it elementary for sure, we think, or we don't know, right? Okay.
Leaving some flexibility.
Okay, that's what I was saying. I didn't know if you had said elementary. It seemed, but so what we're saying there is, based on the funding models and what we see in the outer years in terms of the capacity that the county is telling us they have, we have the potential to add up to maybe 4 additional renovations, and it could be less or more, just kind of depends as we see what our needs are as we move further out. But what we're showing you right now, that is what we're going to ask the board to vote on later, are the changes, which are moving H15 out, putting Cary in, and then the potential for unnamed additional renovation dollars to begin in the outer years for schools at the end of that 7-year plan.
And I think it's worthwhile to note as well, back to the new school slide, we in the CIP team, we work with school choice in planning and assignment to determine when we need new schools based on population growth and assignment patterns. So as we work through this process for this year, we ended up with 2 new elementary schools. And again, those sites, locations are yet to be determined. And then Jack, if you go down to the next slide, other way. What I think is important for everyone to know for this year as opposed to last year, you see in fiscal 24 and 25, that was a bond year last year. So it was important to name those projects. Even though they won't be taking place until the outer years, it was important to do that then. This year we do have the benefit of some time. We have named 4 potential projects right now. As the superintendent pointed out, this could end up being 2 projects. It could end up being more than 4. We don't know at this time. We're doing a deeper dive of the projects that we have on our list that we'll bring back to you all for recommendations some point in time in the future. But just know that because this isn't a bond year, we have a little more time, a little more flexibility to do those deeper dives, and that's why we haven't named those projects yet. It is very likely that next year, this time, we will be bringing that back to you all and naming those projects, or at least recommending them for your approval.
I think one of the things that I've appreciated about this 7-year rolling plan, and I wasn't here for the previous iteration, which sounded a little more chaotic, is that flexibility, like moving the Bobby Murray site funding to Cary High School because we know there's a need there. I think we did the same thing earlier with West Millbrook moving up and getting their renovation a little sooner than planned. And so the unknown is sometimes nerve-wracking because you want to know, but it does provide those flexibilities. So if something does happen at a school, and Superintendent Moore, since you brought it up, because we've had this site on Capitol Boulevard for a while, can you talk about just briefly the programming that is going on there?
So we,
Because it's not
no space
vacant.
goes to waste. So we are using a portion of one of the existing buildings to house the Wake Up and Read initiative, and the community partners that help us with that, so they have a space. We also put some buses out there. We parked some buses out there to help us with where to keep our buses closest to the schools that they serve. So that saves on gas and time also. And then I know there was one additional piece that we were looking at. I'm not sure if
Is
that's
Green Chair project out there?
Which
Or
one?
Green Chair project, or they were somewhere else?
Across the street.
They're across the street. That's why I'm thinking that's
Use it for
the
storage out there.
There's some, we are using it for some
Definitely
storage as well.
Yeah.
So, and there's something else that we've been talking about, but we're not there yet. So.
And then, just briefly, can you talk about the split, if we're looking at, let's say, Cary High School, that the difference in the split in fiscal year 27 with the 5.8, and then when we see the larger amount 2 years later, just what that means as we're looking at this?
Sure. So essentially, the first funding draw is for design for the most part, and then the second one is construction funding, which, depending on fiscal year, size of the project, construction may be split over 2 years too.
Thank you. All right. board members. Lynn, I saw your hand up.
Thanks.
Ms. Edmonds?
Can we please get your slide deck reloaded?
Yes, ma'am. It's a little different than the one.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, like, my question was, slide 5 is really helpful. Your slide, the updated version of slide 5 is really helpful because I didn't have any frame of reference for what we were talking about with relocation. Where you list these examples is really, really helpful. So if we could get that.
Absolutely. And that was a byproduct of our interaction with the core team, suggesting we went over this with them.
So what we will do, as we normally do when we have a revised slide deck, we try to load it and it'll say revised, so it'll be in Simbly. And it'll start with the title as revised so that you'll know which one it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Waters?
I wanted to ask a question about the print funds. Is there an average dollar amount or a maximum dollar amount that you allocate to a school when you look at using print funds to?
No, but a good question, because what we're finding out is that some of the print projects that are being proposed are really outside of the boundaries and funding capacity of the print money that we have. So some of our discussions have been back up in the existing school category and this is all CIP core team work, maybe we need to look at trying to carve out some money or relocate some projects up into that category because they are larger projects and they require more money. The print, we don't have a specific dollar amount, but what we're finding is that as we look at them and evaluate them, the pricing is continuing to go up. We've had conversations with the county about this. Some of these larger print projects, maybe we can move them up and let them be a part of the larger capital process. So we've discussed it.
Okay, thank you. Great question. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you all for this presentation and appreciate your time and sharing the flexibility, and thank you to the core team for busting out those definitions so we had a better understanding.
Very good.
At this point, it is 3:42, so I'm going to make a suggestion that we have a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Well, we need to read the whole thing. Oh, here it is.
There you go.
Is there a motion to go into closed session to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11A1 and A3, to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privileges provided in GS 143-318.11A3, and to consider confidential student information protected under GS 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 USC 1232G, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3 due to current litigation, LP by and through JP and KP versus Wake County Board of Education et al., EDMC no number 520CV481BO and CL by and through SL and TL versus Wake County Board of Education 23 EDC 00665 and ES versus Wake County Board of Education 21 CVS 5 followed by 5 zeros and the number 2. I'll now entertain it.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of going into closed session, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are now in closed session.